Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here, and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup results. Okay, so there are quite a few fixtures to go through, and a lot of results to give our opinions on, shall we say. And it's quite obvious from the list I've got in front of me that some things really haven't gone according to plan for some teams. So, we're going to start off for the first game of the Overwatch League 2019. We had a rematch between the Philadelphia Fusion and the London Spitfire, which was your Grand Finals match from last year. And London did win that in the Grand Finals, Philadelphia Fusion looking for some revenge. And this is an interesting game. Very interesting. Fusion looking good. Obviously, we're heavily dominated by the 3-3 meta, as the Overwatch analysts like to call it, because people on Disney XD and stuff like that might not know, in the Overwatch community, we call it GOATs. So, we are still heavily in the grips of GOATs. Most of these games have been playing GOATs. What a surprise that is. But there's a big issue with GOATs, and that is the London Spitfire. They are not happy on GOATs. I think it's quite obvious. One thing I've done throughout these fixtures is something I didn't do last year, is made notes on them. And one of my notes just says, London not looking outstanding on GOATs. And you'll see that come up later on in the video as well. Basically, Philadelphia won this 3-1. And it's kind of interesting the way the match went. London, without a doubt, struggled badly on GOATs. I mean, London don't even look like a mid-table team when playing GOATs at the moment. I know this is just the first week, but they really don't. So they lost Ilios, they lost Hollywood because Fusion were just better on GOATs. Then we come to Volskaya, where we can see some different team comps come in. The 3-3 GOATs not dominating as much. London Spitfire roll out with a quad DPS. And this is where London got their map win. London dominated on quad DPS. Absolutely dominated. But in the end, they came back to Rialto, where it went back to GOATs, and lost. So, London are struggling big time on GOATs. And I am expecting a bad stage from London. I'm not expecting them in the stage playoffs. It's going to be a very difficult stage if you're a Spitfire fan, and that's me included. Next up, we had the New York Excelsior taking on the Boston Uprising. Now, this was super duper interesting. If we thought the Philadelphia Fusion Spitfire game was interesting, this one turned out even more interesting. NYXL were your champions-elect last season, and ultimately failed in the finals. Boston did very well last season, better than expected, but we were not impressed with what they did in the off-season in terms of transfers. We weren't really that enamored with their DPS lineup. Then, obviously, coming into this, they lose Gamsu. Gamsu has now been transferred to the Shanghai Dragons. More on them later, but they've obviously just lost their main tank. So what do? They promote Fusions. Fusions did very well for the UK team in the Overwatch World Cup, and I don't have any disagreement with promoting Fusions. So, Boston were very raggedy. Their communication was going to take a hit here with Fusions not probably having that much time to train with the team. But, they do very well. They lose to the NYXL, but they only lose 2-1. That is big, to be quite honest. For a team that, had to do some very late changes, and NYXL, let's concentrate on the NYXL here a second. They are looking good. They are not looking outstanding on GOATs. The one plus that XL have, and this gets translated later on as well, is they play the Sombra well. And the highlight of this week is the fact that Sombra is big against GOATs, and there's a lot of people running it. But Boston, playing on GOATs with Fusions in the tank role, playing Rhine and playing Winston, Fusions was hitting some massive shatters on Rhine against NYXL. And I think it's promising for Boston in this meta, which will change at the end of this stage. I'd imagine in stage 2 we will be rid of goats, considering the changes to the way that armor works in the game. I don't think we'll see much goats, and I think Brigitte will be a dead hero. So then we will probably go back into a DPS heavy meta, and then I would worry for Boston somewhat. But very good showing from the Boston Uprising. Then we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now this one's quite interesting as well, because this was a big test of where the Seoul Dynasty were and where the Gladiators were, because they've made some changes. Gladiators were good last season, Seoul were very disappointing. Seoul picked this one up and get the win 3-1. Now I kind of expected this. A lot of people seem to be doubting the Seoul Dynasty. And we also got some clarity on what happened with Fisher. And Fisher was agreed a transfer much earlier on, probably not that long after he joined the Gladiators, because he had communication issues. That's why he didn't play in the Grand Finals for Gladiators. It was agreed between him and the Gladiators that he would be transferred to Seoul as soon as the regular season ended. So that's why they didn't have him for the Grand Finals. But Seoul, with a main tank that actually works, are looking very good. Seoul, after 3 games, were the best Korean team on goats, in my opinion. Even better looking than the NYXL. Gladiators, they just came up against a good team. I see Gladiators well in the pack, and I think they will be, but they came up against a good team, and it's a tough start for the Gladiators anyway. Next up, we have the first all-Chinese game. We have our first Chinese winners in the Overwatch League, because remember, Shanghai didn't win a game last season, and this, of course, involves Shanghai, but it's against the Hangzhou Spark. I am hopefully getting that right now. I hope I'm getting it right. Anyway, this is our first look at Hangzhou, and they look good. They look like they're living up to the expectations of what we wanted from this Spark team. They do look good. They beat Shanghai 3-1. Now, that's not to say Shanghai were trash. They weren't. Remember, they'd lost Fearless. He's now gone back to China with, I think, health issues. And they literally only had Gamsu for a day. They could not throw Gamsu into an Overwatch League game against Hangzhou and expect anything. So they played Geguri solo tank playing Hammond, and played DPS heavy. DM's looking good. There are promising signs for the Shanghai Dragons. But ultimately, they did fall to the Hangzhou Spark. Hangzhou Spark have had a very good week. Spoilers. Anyway, moving on. We have the next day, and we have Toronto Defiant taking on the Houston Outlaws. Now, I expected this to be very close. And this is another game where the Sombra came into a big spotlight for the Toronto Defiant. Stella, who is Toronto Defiant's Sombra player, looked very good. Not quite as good as one of the DPS coming up, but he was very, very good for Toronto. Toronto take the win 3-2. It was an incredibly close game. It was well worth watching. Then, we had the moment that I think a lot of people have been waiting for. The Atlanta Reigns debut into the Overwatch League versus the Florida Mayhem. And Fran, what does he do? Our first game is on Ilios. The first hero Fran plays in the Overwatch League is Torbjorn. And guess what? It actually flipping worked. Not only did he play Torbjorn, he got the first ever elimination with Torbjorn in the Overwatch League's history. And he actually dominated on that Torbjorn and then switched to Zarya and also did a lot of work. Very good play from Fran. His debut in the Overwatch League could not have gone any better than it did. Let's be honest, Atlanta look very good and they just 4-0 the Mayhem. The Mayhem look... they were the worst team we'd seen so far. By an absolute country mile. not really much to say about the Mayhem. They were bad. They were just bad. The only shining light perhaps was Hagapon. He looked decent. But Hagapon can't carry. Is on his own. A lot of work to do for them. It gave us our first 4-0. Atlanta looking good and sitting pretty. Then we had a big teller, and that was Dallas Fuel taking on the San Francisco Shock. San Fran, much favoured in this season of the Overwatch League. Dallas Fuel with a lot to prove, and they proved absolutely nothing. I'm going to be brutally honest. Dallas Fuel were very bad. Very bad. I cannot... I can give any good points for Dallas Fuel. They got 4-0'd by San Francisco Shock. San Francisco Shock looked very good. Dallas Fuel looked very poor. Effect on Zarya just was not working. They were completely outplayed. Maybe, I mean, Dallas were looking like they were improving at the end of last season. And then, I mean, they were bad. I'm sorry, they were bad. No ways around it. And that's pretty much all I can say. They didn't play Mickey on Brigitte, which I was enormously surprised about. I thought they might play around Mickey on the Brigitte, considering he was best Brigitte in the league at the end of last season. So, a lot of surprises here. Next up is the Chengdu Hunters taking on the Guangzhou Spark. I knew I'd do that at some point. Guangzhou Charge. This was a massive brawl. It was scrappy, brawly, tanky, and Chengdu Hunters won. 3-2. There's not really much to say about the game. Chengdu, I was surprised. I must admit. But I think Guangzhou just need to settle down. They need to settle down and work out some communication with that very diverse roster. Philadelphia had a slow start at the start of last season. I don't think this is panic buttons for Guangzhou at all. Even though I expected Chengdu to be right at the bottom. Well, not quite right at the bottom. Next up, we have the London Spitfire in action again. And this was the Battle of Europe, if you can call London Spitfire a European team. The problem is, Paris Eternal are very European. And I mean European players. And if there is any region in the world that knows how to play tanks, and play tanks well, it is the EU. And Paris demonstrate this to very good effect. Cruz was brilliant on Lucio. Where we were looking good with Ben Best, and the whole of Paris were looking good, and they 3-1 the Spitfire. Simple as that. Spitfire, again, they just got outplayed on Goats. As simple as that. Both games, against Fusion and against Eternal, they were just outplayed on Goats. They got one map win. That was on King's Row. And you might think, well, that's actually a tank-heavy map. Yes, it is. But the one thing that London Spitfire did on King's Row, and it caught Paris Eternal out, is they subbed in Guard for Birdring. Now, Birdring had been playing the Zarya. This moved Fury onto the Zarya, and Guard came in and played Sombra. And Guard is a Sombra specialist that London Spitfire brought in. He carried the Spitfire in that King's Row game. Absolutely carried them. Without Guard, they would have lost 4-0. I am fully believing that. Guard carried that game, and he was the best Sombra. Best Sombra I think I've seen all week, to be quite honest. He was absolutely fantastic. But it's going to be a long and painful stage 1 for London. Until Goats is out of the meta, it's going to be very difficult for London to get any traction, unless they sort it out. And they've got to play Guangzhou as well, and I don't see them winning against Guangzhou. Going to be a difficult stage for London. Anyway, moving on. We have the Washington Justice playing their first game against New York Excelsior. So, what can we take away from this game? New York Excelsior are still very much good. And this is another example of where Excelsior used the Sombra to great effect. Washington Justice got one map win, and that was on Horizon. And that map turned into a big old brawl. And Washington got the win out of the chaos, and I think we're seeing a few teams do that as well. Where these maps just descend into chaos, and when they brawl like it, it just tends to go either way, and Washington Justice did get a map off Excel. I don't think Washington would do this with two of the other teams I can see in the league right now. That I can see two teams that are possibly better than NYXL right now, which is not what we were saying last season. But Washington do start off with a loss. It's not a 4-0 loss like I expected it to be. But yeah, work to do for Washington. I mean, Janus got absolutely, completely out-tanked by Mano. Completely out-tanked. Moving on, we have the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Guangzhou Spark. Again, this was a fantastic game. Much like the Toronto-Houston game, it was incredibly close. Valiant looked good, actually. I was kind of surprised about this. I was worried for the Valiant going into the season. They put up a massive fight against Hangzhou, sorry. But Hangzhou do win this 3-2. Hangzhou are looking good, actually. They are looking super, super good. And going 2-0 in their first week is better than you could expect when most people are fancying Shanghai at the moment. Valiant were very good last season. That's a very good start for Hangzhou. Then, this is the team I've been on about for pretty much the whole series so far. We get to see the Vancouver Titans taking on the Shanghai Dragons. Vancouver Titans, if you didn't know, go and check out the Vancouver Titans preview. They are runaway from Contenders Korea, who are very, very good. And if there is any team that knows how to play 3-3 GOATs, it is Vancouver. They have played it for ages in Korea, and they are coming off the back of a Season 2 Contenders Korea win. They trash Shanghai 4-0. The interesting thing is I say trash, but they trash them when being mirrored. What do I mean by that? When Vancouver mirror a GOATs comp, they will, I think, trash any team. But when Shanghai pulled some interesting stuff, because Gamsu was playing for Shanghai at this point, they played some interesting DPS heavy comps, especially on, I think they went to Busan Mecha Base. They played some DPS heavy comps. They played Gamsu on Hammond, and it got super duper interesting. It got slightly. We were looking at this and thinking, whoa, is Shanghai gonna do something here? But Vancouver ultimately ground out Busan. But then we move on to other maps where Vancouver just dominated on GOATs. They just absolutely dominated on GOATs. And then we get to Dorado, which became, because it was 3-0 at the point, a bit of a training ground. They went dive, and I was thrilled to see this. I miss dive an incredible amount. And Vancouver also did very well on dive, which they were known for before they played 3-3 GOATs. I would say you are looking at either Paris or Vancouver being the best team on GOATs right now. I would go for Vancouver. I honestly don't think any team can go toe-to-toe with Vancouver on 3-3 GOATs and beat them. I honestly don't. And I would like to be proven wrong, but I would say at the moment the favourites for the stage are Vancouver. Ooh. Maybe not. Anyway. Okay, so now we have some interesting fixtures. And these went on for a while. The last day was a long one. We have the Houston Outlaws taking on the Boston Uprising. This was 3-2 to the Boston Uprising. And I kind of expected this considering Boston's strong showing against the NYXL earlier in the week. Houston have got a problem right now, and that problem is they have advantages in fights and then choke and don't see through that advantage. So work for the Houston Outlaws, and After the games this week, you have to say, Houston are looking like maybe they're going to struggle more than I'd anticipated, although that could be very heavily meta-based. Do we really want to see Lynx on Brigitte? Let's be honest. When he was on Widow, he really did do a lot. So, after that we have Philadelphia Fusion taking on the Atlanta Reign. Now, this was interesting. I actually had Atlanta down to win this one after Atlanta really did tear apart the Florida Mayhem. This was incredibly close, and on another day it really could have gone Atlanta Reign's way, but it was 3-2 to the Philadelphia Fusion. Fusion starting the league off very strong, with 2 wins on the bounce, against 2 very good teams. London, you know, let's not talk about that. And then we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators. Again, one I expected to be very close, but I thought would be favoured by the Shock. It wasn't. Gladiators took this 3-2, Shock showing some frailties compared to their performance against the Dallas Fuel the other day. And it's kind of weird. I expected Shock to do well there, and they didn't. Gladiators did take advantage of some of Shock's weaknesses, with their front line being a bit too far forward. And Gladiators get a win that is much needed. You don't really want to go the first week 0-2, do you? And then we come to the last fixture. Now this was incredibly surprising. Seoul Dynasty taking on the Dallas Fuel. Now Dallas coming off the back of that thing that was the 4-0 loss to San Francisco Shock. And at the moment I'm not sure whether that was Shock playing well or Dallas playing really poorly. I mean, I think Dallas were just really poor. They were all over the place. And Seoul, coming off the back of that win over the Gladiators, we were expecting Seoul to dominate this match, and they definitely didn't. Seoul looked out of sorts, majorly. Dallas Fuel played on taking advantage of Fisher's aggressiveness. Seoul really couldn't mop up anything after their CC. They weren't getting enough kills. Dallas looked better since adjusting to playing AKM more on the Zarya rather than Effect. Effect was one of the weak links, I think, for Dallas against San Francisco Shock, and obviously Jane and Aero and the crew at Dallas have sorted this out. Dallas beat the Seoul Dynasty 3-1. I think for the first time in the Overwatch League, if I'm not right. Maybe they did. Maybe they beat them in Stage 4 last year, but that's a big win for Dallas. And that is more like the Dallas Fuel I was expecting to see at the start of the season, not the Dallas that took on San Francisco Shock. And hopefully that will be a platform and a springboard for Dallas to do well in the coming weeks. So, that is your results. Those are your results for the first week of this stage. Up in the corner, I'm hoping I remember to put it there, is a poll asking you for your most interesting game of the week out of a few of the games. Probably Valiant versus Spark and Outlaws Uprising, Fusion, Reign, those sorts of games. I might look at one of those games individually because they were incredibly good games. I mean, some of the best games I've ever seen in the Overwatch League, including last year. So, and this is just the first week. It's looking really promising going further into the league this year. It's looking close. It's looking like we're going to get some really nice games. I mean, I think that was something like a 9-hour stream for the Overwatch League yesterday, because there were so many map 5s. So, and we haven't seen a ridiculous amount of 4-0s either. We've only seen 3 4-0s. So that's really good. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here with the results. There should be 3 more videos, because there'll be a preview for next week, and there'll be 2 other videos I'm also planning on. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then!